Today I'm going to be painting a winter snow scene, and this is an adaptation of an earlier painting I have painted of this same barn, and this is a picture of it in the fall, and I'm going to attempt to turn this into a winter scene to show you how you can do that same picture in different seasons. All right, we're wetting down the sky with plain water, adding just a little color to make it so you can see it. But basically, all I'm trying to do is put water on the surface at this point. No color, and I think you can see the shine on the paper of the clear water. Now I'll be adding a little cobalt blue to the sky, very light wash, a little bit of ultramarine blue mixed in with it, just enough to darken the sky. While it's not snowing on this day, in order to give proper contrast to the snow, which is going to be in the foreground, we need to darken the sky significantly so that it will show up. Now I'm adding trees in the background, fall colors. This is burnt sienna, where obviously the sky is still a little wet there, which allows the colors to diffuse, and just adding the same color, burnt sienna. Now a burnt umber, a little darker, letting it diffuse just to suggest trees in the background. Filling it in a little darker toward the where the snow line begins, and this helps to accentuate the snow, of course. Be putting in some shadows here, but this is all to bring out the snow, and of course there are trees back there in the original painting. So the sky, while it looked a little dark, certainly will lighten up as it dries, and the area that I'm pointing to is the diffused trees in the background. Now, getting prepared to add color to the area. We need to add a little more color to the area behind there, perhaps a little more reds, and I needed to wet that, so you saw I put a card to mask out the area so that it wouldn't wet the barn. I didn't want, when I add color, I don't want it to run over into the barn area. Dried a little too fast. My studio was a little warm the day I did this, so I'm adding a little color now. You can see on the right side enough of the palette to see that there's some reds I'm putting in here. Still a trace, even though it's a winter scene, a trace of some fall colors. This picture is called First Snow. So first snow in the valley, and the original picture was a fall scene, which was autumn in the valley, and this is a sequel, so to speak. So adding just a little color, that helps to complement the barn, which is a red barn, and give a little color to the picture. Otherwise it's a rather drab, dull picture. So again, heightening, adding a little color. Since I've added water to that area, we need to add a little more color at the bottom. Suggesting brush, which were in the shadow area of the trees. Okay. Now this is wet in wet technique at the moment. There will be several techniques used, wet in wet, wet on dry, and dry brush. And this is wet in wet. Obviously you saw me wet the back area of the trees there. And so that's why these colors are diffusing, spreading out. And now we'll switch to a different section of the painting. I'm testing to see if I can scratch into that dark back area with some. First I used a credit card, the edge of a credit card. Now I'm using a palette knife to see if I can scratch into it some white lines. While it's wet, you can sort of scrape out the color to show the lighter colored bark of some of the trees perhaps that are back there. You have to do that at the right time or else it won't work. If it dries too much, then you can't do it. I needed to put in a little bit more. I used a spray bottle there. You'll see spraying. Wasn't satisfied with enough. I'm wiping out the area which is down in the snow. I'm going to cover that up with some shadows so it doesn't make as much difference. Probably spending a little too much time in that area right now, but gives you an idea. Of course, this video is the speed is increased about 4 times the regular speed for most of it. So right now I'm still I think you can see some of the white bark that I'm dragging out with a sharp object. Happen to be using a razor blade at that point. I'm not actually scratching into the surface. I'm just lifting out the paint. All right. Now it's about time to move on to a different section of the painting. What you can't see is I was drying that area back there, those trees, and I've got it like I want it, so I was drying it with a hair dryer. Now I want to go into the clean up a little bit of the roof edge there. I'm using a plain brush with no water, just enough wet brush to lift the paint off. Wetting it, scrubbing it a little with a rough scrubbing brush, and then dabbing it with a tissue to lift the color off. Many times that's not necessary, but in the case of that roof, I didn't want those trees to blend into the roof line. That would obviously ruin the perspective. Those trees are supposed to be many yards, 50, 100 yards behind that house, and so you can't have the tree line blending into the roof. Many times you want soft edges, but that's not one. Now I'm wetting the roof with plain water, and we're going to make the roof the original painting, if you remember, I showed you at the beginning, was a tin roof with some rusting in many places, so that wouldn't have changed, except where some of the areas would perhaps retain some snow from the this first snow. So I'm putting on the rust using a burnt umber color, and suggesting the tin in various places as it's rusted. Near the bottom there is a little snow that's accumulated, so I'm sort of protecting that area. I'm not going all the way down. The roof line also is a little different angle there, so you can see that changes. You don't want to cover the entire roof. It's not the original color was more of a silver or a light gray. Of course, it's rusted over the years, and so you want to leave some areas that are still lighter. Now we'll move to the other roof of the small building, which is a darker roof, more like slate. And this is an old barn and probably was more slate, not the asbestos shingles of today. Now, as I painted this, I realized that I've created a problem for myself, because the contrast between that roof and the tree line is a mistake. There is no contrast between the tree line and the roof, so later on I'll correct that by lightening that area of trees right behind the roof, so it will bring out the roof. Those are kind of things you sometimes make a mistake as you go, but they're correctable. So all you need to do is take a little time, lighten that area by lifting color out. It's one of the advantages of watercolor. You can correct some mistakes or problem areas in watercolors. Some people feel it's not correctable, but many of them are, more than you would think. So I'm mixing new colors now. Going into the red of the side of the barn. Since I've already painted this barn previously, I'm trying to match the colors that I used at that point. If this were a standalone painting that I had never painted before, I could pretty much be content with whatever red I wanted to use. But this red sort of needs to match the red on that other building, that other painting. Now that's put in as a rather flat wash. The right side of that is going to have to be darkened, because that's on the shade side of it. Using a tissue to sort of just dab into the board texture, just to give it a little different texture. Obviously, it's an old barn, so it's not all the same color. Some has lightened over time. Some is darker. But I want to keep it fairly light because it is in the sunny side of the picture. The light is coming from the left toward the right, and I'm painting the shadow side of that stone barn. You could just make a flat wash down through there, but I chose to miss certain areas of white, because some of the limestone in this barn is lighter than others, and limestone tends to be running from a blue-gray to almost a white. And on the back of the barn is a little wooden building, putting that in. As you probably know, most paintings, watercolor paintings, or any artwork, mainly it's not about color so much as it is about value. You hear that over and over, and it's very true. If you get your values correct, your painting will look pretty much acceptable painting. The colors are secondary. So what we're doing now is sort of establishing values, correcting them, lightening them, darkening them, so that they'll be in proper proportion to the scene. Obviously, the side of that barn, the right side of that barn, the stone section will have to be darkened, but this is an underlayment of light colors, because as we darken certain rocks, stones, you couldn't start with a darker area, because it's much more difficult to make it light than it is to gradually make it darker. In watercolors, again, as you know, if you have any experience with watercolors, you go from the lightest to the darkest. You start with the lightest areas of your painting, putting light washes on, and build up from there until you get to the darkest values. So you have to have a clear picture in your mind where you're going. In this case, I do have a picture because I've painted this before. But even then, the values change, particularly since this is a snow scene. There's reflected light from the snow on the barns and other objects. So you can see what I'm doing now is gradually adding some shadows at the bottom. At the bottom of barns, usually you get splashing from rain on the ground up on the barns. The bottom of the stone is normally darker. As you go toward the upper part, it's more the natural stone. This is an old barn. It's been around many years. They don't make this style of barn anymore. Now I'm clearing off a space on my palette there to get a little more clean area to work. And I'm going to move on to adding a little more to the bottom area of the barn. This area is sort of in the shade and partly in the sun. That red area is an area that sticks out over that indention area under the barn. Painting the doorways or the entranceways under the barn. That stone, the stone area under there. But since it's in the sun, much of it's in the sun, the stonework is sort of bleached out and much lighter color. But there are several entrances into this, under this barn, where the cows will go to get out of the weather. Now that doorway that I just put in, that third doorway, is essential, not just because it's there. Even if it hadn't been there, I would have put something there, because that dark area, that dark value, actually brings out the light stonework of the little additional building there to the left of the barn. So that serves the purpose of contrasting the light value and the dark value. The darker that doorway was, the more obviously that the little house would stand out. So it's all about values and little tricks that you can do to bring out certain areas of the picture. Obviously, you've got to darken the side of that red wooden part of the barn there. But I'm putting in some of the windows in the stone. These are not so much windows as they are just like little skylights in the stone barn to let some light in. Adding a door to the little building. Now that's a stone building as well, but again, the left side of that little building is in the full sunlight and the right side is in partial shade. It's going to have some reflection from the snow that's in the little corral area there. Now I'm adding some of the windows that is in the wooden part of the barn. There are 4 of those, and adding a little color to that area. Now I'm using a bridge that I made, which keeps my hand up off the paper so that the oils in your hand don't get on the paper. If they do, later on the watercolor won't penetrate the paper quite the right way. Won't get it dirty, so just use it there. I'm making this a light blue under painting, and then I'll be accentuating that. Now I've gone back and working on the barn, the stonework a little bit, adding a few of the same blue. That's why I moved over to there, sort of used the same blue that I was using on the little stone building. Went over there to suggest stonework in that other area. Won't be the other area and won't stay over there. Now, you don't want to just spend all your time laying stonework. You're just trying to suggest it, and that's what I'm doing here. It's very light, very thin, transparent wash, not much color in this. Doing the same thing now to the little building, since that's stonework. Slightly different color stone. And that the fence is really a stone wall, and doing the same to that. The left part of that stone wall is in the sun. It will be lighter, and the right side is in the darker. Now I've gotten this far, and I've realized that I need to darken that side. So I put a light wash of cobalt blue over that side to darken it. But you'll notice that the work that I did before is not covered up. I'm not covering that up. That stonework that I was putting in with a darker gray shows through that light wash. The same way on the little building. Now I'm putting the shadow along the edge of the building and the stone wall there to accentuate, and you'll see that that darker value brings out that stone wall. That shadow serves that purpose, but of course there would be a shadow there in reality, and in a snow scene like this, it's really the shadows that make the picture. You see the shadows now I'm putting in along the tree line up there. And I've got to bring some shadows down right up against that little building, because otherwise you wouldn't see the left side of that building. And that's why I'm darkening it a little bit there. So now you can see the left side of the building begins to come forward. Putting some up there. One trick is you can turn the paper upside down and work on it. It's a little easier to do. Putting in some of the shadows. I've sped the video up at this point because it's sort of monotonous just putting in these shadows over and over, but you can see basically what I'm doing. You can also see that blue that was at the shade of the building has lightened because the time has gone on. Now, my camera battery was wearing out, so I had to jump forward. This is close to the end now, and you can see that I've put in a lot more shadows, darkened certain areas, so that it shows up. The heightened area is put in the trees, the road, the fence, 2 fences, and accentuated certain little areas. Put in the little old car or buggy back there in the back, some grass work in the front, and trees, what's left of some of the oak trees that are hanging around, even that's first snow. This is probably 95% completed at this point. You can see the completed picture at my website, rayedmonds.com. rayedmonds.com. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this has been instructive for you. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Ray Edmonds,